Well, welcome to the Pulpit Fiction Podcast, the lectionary podcast for preacher seekers and Bible geeks. This is episode 648 for Sunday, November 30th, 2025. It's the first Sunday of Advent in year A. Holy moly. Happy New Year, everybody. We are going to kick off with a conversation on Matthew 24, 36 through 44. No better way to start the new year than with a little more apocalypse. So we'll talk a little bit about the unexpected hour. Then we'll dip our toe into an old favorite, Isaiah 2, verses 1 through 5, and we'll end up with a short little nugget on Romans 13, 8 through 14. I'm Eric Fistler, UCC pastor out here in the shining shores of Crystal Lake. And with me, as always, the marvelous Methodist in Rock Island, Illinois. It's Rob McCoy. Rob, what's happening?
No, not much. Just having one of those blah kind of cold November rain sort of days. It's a Guns N' Roses kind of day. It's a crappy day, and I'm having a crappy day. So, but still ready to go. Still always good. It's always a pick me up to get together with you and get started and start digging into some apocalypse. That'll make me feel better.
I really think that really cheers just about everybody up. A little bit of the apocalypse, a little bit of no, some days are like that, man, and that sucks. I know we were talking about it before we started the show. And apologies to everybody. That actually had nothing to do with us being late. We had some technological mishaps and things that happened, but we got them figured out. So if you were hoping to join us online and you're like, guys, you're 20 minutes late, sorry about that. Quick reminder too, next week we're going to be here on Tuesday at 1:30. Not on Wednesday, but on Tuesday because of the U.S. holiday, Thanksgiving, that's coming up. And Rob and I have stuff going on Wednesday. So Tuesday, and that's actually going to be for the next 2 weeks. So Tuesday next week, Tuesday the week after that. We'll try to throw something up on socials just so that y'all know it. We love having you guys join us online. And then too, if you're joining us online, throw something in the chat on YouTube or Facebook. We'd love to be able to show some of you had some amazing comments, and you just message us to it. If you throw that in the chat, then we can share that in the show, and that would be really awesome. Rob, I know you guys got Hanging of the Greens this weekend, the 23rd. We're recording here on the 19th. Do you guys, other than lighting the Advent candle, you got any big exciting things you do for Advent?
I mean, the biggest thing is our Christmas tree. We've got a big, tree with the different symbols, the Christ monograms, and we pick out 4 every year that we hang and talk about specially. So that's a 40, almost 50-year tradition here.
Is that in addition to the candles, or in the place of the candles, or
in addition to the candles? Sometimes we kind of combine them into one. This year, the candles are going to be at the beginning. And for the last few years, I've turned the Christmas moment into a children's moment. So I have all the kids gather around the Christmas tree, and then we look at it and talk about it a little bit. So that's how we've done it the last few years. But
for those who may not know, so we also have a giant Christmas tree, and a Christmas tree is like a Christmas tree, but instead of ornaments, they're usually different symbols are embroidered. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but it's symbols specifically relating to Christ. So like, I know like ours has anchors and stars and crosses and a bunch of nativity scenes, things like that on it.
Christ monogram, I believe, is where it comes from. It's monograms of Christ. So it's Chrismon, and so every one of them, they're all white. Typically, I think they're usually white and gold. So we've got a whole bunch of them, all handmade over the years, and so I pick out 4 that we highlight each week and hang and sing. And so that's a fun. I mean, that's an Advent tradition that's pretty much the same every year, but it's one of those things that I think people expect. So it's a good tradition, though.
No, it sounds awesome. That sounds good. Yeah, we just do the usual. We have our Advent candles. We go ball blue, not purple. I am full team blue. Folks, let us know if you're team purple or team blue, and we'll let you know if you're right or wrong on that. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but we have that. And then we always have, it's weird because we always have, we have a huge Christmas concert. So Christmas concert Sunday is always a big day. And then we have a cantata. And so depending on what's happening, like last year, a couple years ago, when Christmas Eve was on a Sunday, felt like I only had 2 Sundays out of Christmas. So, or one that year. So That's a little bit weird. Yeah. So, but it should be fun. I love Advent. I am all in on Advent this year. We're doing the Sanctified Art piece. We rebranded it a little bit. I didn't quite like their titling. So we rebranded it, but they're not currently a sponsor of the show, but maybe again. But if you're looking for stuff, they have good stuff. Salt Collective has some good stuff. Rob, I know you were talking about the great series that if you're looking for something outside the lectionary, that Bible Project has on
Yeah.
different, specifically digging deep into those four words: hope, peace, joy, and love. Right?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's what we're going to be using. I'm deciding if I'm going to use the videos in worship or just in Bible study. If you're not familiar with the Bible Project, just Google the Bible Project and Advent series, and they've got a deep dive word study on the four big Advent words, and they're really fascinating. Three of them in the Hebrew version, and then the love is looking at agape. But even still, they kind of mix it up a little bit, look at them from a couple different languages and how they're related. So the difference between the Hebrew understanding of hope and the Greek understanding of hope they're really interesting little videos. So the only thing I'm trying to decide now is if I'm going to share them in worship also, because they're about 4 minutes, so they don't take too long. Um, yeah, that's my study. And it's a great little curriculum also. So my Bible studies are I do a pastor Bible study for they have a nice little curriculum to go along with it. Nothing too fancy, but you know, they're good. It's really good stuff. Yeah.
Nice. Well, if you're not doing any of those things and you're preaching the wonderful lectionary, then let's jump into it with our first reading. We always, all of you who've been joining us for a while, know we always start with the gospel. So let's hear it.
Very few comparatively know what is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Good news, everyone!
All right. Well, the gospel today comes from Matthew 24:36 through 44. Always fun to start a new year with a passage from the very end, Rob, of a gospel, of the gospel, right?
Right.
So this is part of the final discourse of the gospel of Matthew. This is the Common English Bible. But nobody knows when that day or hour will come, not the heavenly angels and not the Son. Only the Father knows. As it was in the time of Noah, so it will be at the time of the human one. And in those days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. They didn't know what was happening until the flood came and swept them all away. The coming of the human one will be like that. At that time, there will be two men in the field. One will be taken and the other left. Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and the other left. Therefore, stay alert. You don't know when the day of the Lord is coming, but you understand that if the head of the house knew at what time the thief would come, he would keep alert and wouldn't allow the thief to break into his house. Therefore, you also should be prepared, because the human one will come at a time that you don't know.
All right. So yeah, this is typical, right? Advent one every year, a little bit of apocalyptic literature. Um Never been our favorite. So I feel like we we deal with this every year. And yet it is also a good reminder that Advent is not just the beginning. It's the beginning, right? It's the revealing of something new, and it's not just the coming of Christ at Christmas. It's also the coming of Christ as a Messiah, as a second coming, and it gives us a chance to examine what that means. Because if we abandon that explanation, then we leave it up to a lot of folks like Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins and Kirk Cameron to tell us what it is, and that's not it. So, as much as I dislike this as a reading, I like it as an opportunity to talk about what it really means, right? To try to, and that's what's frustrating. I feel like half the work is just sort of correcting bad theology that is very popular, um, but also very dangerous. And so, and I guess you kind of just got to figure out how much of this are you going to go into corrective teaching mode, and how much are you going to deal with this as what it is, as a moment of prepare and take the good news for what it is, or take this gospel reading as a chance to try to undo some damage.
Yeah, I typically not always a huge fan. I mean, here's the thing. Apocalyptic literature is kind of like John 6. It's great. It's got some great nuggets, beautiful pieces, things like that. But when we hit that period where we have in August, I think it was just this last year. Maybe it was 2 years ago, year B or C, where you've got 6 weeks in John 6, 6 weeks in lectionary. And it's just a lot of John 6. We've been in apocalyptic literature leading up toward Christ the King and keep coming, so it can feel a little much. Now, this passage, though, Rob, I think for some reason, as I was reading it today, I really like this passage where it is. And here's why. I like it because of the connection to Noah, which I hadn't really stood out to me before. So we've got this piece that has always been understood as judgment, right? So you've got that rapture premillennial dispensationalist theology that says, well, see, this is it, and this is a primary text for the rapture. Some are going to be left and some are going to be taken away. And it'll be just like that, right? 2 men will be a will, one will be taken and the other will be left. And typically the understanding is, Rob, is that the one who is taken is being taken up to heaven. But if you actually read the scripture, let's reread verse 39. They didn't know what was happening until the flood came and swept them all away. It's actually the flood that's taking people, the judgment that takes people away. Which reminds me of is it Mark Davies? Is that They Left Behind and Loving It?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's actually a reversal of how this is often treated, right? It's not a escape plan of we're going to be beamed away. Actually, if we're hearing the analogy or the connection that Jesus is making to Noah, the ones who are taken away, those are the ones that are being taken away in judgment in the flood, right? It's who's left behind after the flood. Noah are those who are left behind. Noah and his family are the only ones. The righteous ones are the ones who are left behind. And so, while still, it can be this scary piece, but I think instead there's a couple of ideas here. I think one is to just raise that point as an easy way to just turn this on its head and say, there's more happening here than a lot of people would have us think. And a lot of, especially in premillennial dispensationalists, Tim LaHaye, Kirk Cameron, all that sort of idea, are going to have us think this actually isn't as supportive of the rapture as we might think. But also the other piece of it, and this comes to me, I'm going to make this connection to the barbershop. I was getting my haircut yesterday. The other piece of it is this, Rob, which is Jesus has just compared his second coming to the most horrifically devastating transformative event in the history of the world. Right? Which the mass genocide and transformation of the world, which to one extent, God, terrifying, horrible, awful. On the other hand, transformative. And to some extent, one can argue in the same way that the whole, what God failed to do through Noah and the ark, which was to purify the world, save the righteous, destroy the wicked. The second coming of Jesus is going to be like that. The difference is that we know that Jesus doesn't work through violent action and genocidal eradication. And when we had that conversation with Walter Brueggemann, that interview, y'all can find it on our website. One of the questions we had asked him was actually, I think our first conversation with him was about biblical violence. And Brueggemann made the argument that the biblical narrative is talking about God overcoming God's addiction to violence, peaking early in Genesis with the genocidal destruction of the world in Noah and the flood, and culminating kind of then moving toward dying on the cross, taking on human flesh and vulnerability and dying on the cross as opposed to. So this idea of, so what is this? You have this devastatingly transformative event which will affect everybody and everything, and is going to be transformative and is going to heal the world in the way that violence never could. It's a new flood. But it's going to be devastating. It's not going to be, and what a great way to enter Advent. It's not going to come in like a lamb. So last thing, and then I'll shut up, Rob, which is I was at the barber shop yesterday, and I had a day, and I had 90 minutes to pick up my son, go get our hair cut before then I had, after 10 hours at church, before I had to go back for another 3 hours of meetings. And so I was just, my well was pretty empty. And a guy came in and started complaining about protesters who were protesting against immigration and what was happening. And then the conversation started up about how, well, there's no peaceful protests and how bad the protests are. And the idea that, well, no matter if you don't like it, just be quiet and sit in the corner and do your own thing. That's also not who Jesus was. Jesus is not going to be violent, but Jesus also isn't going to passively sit by as creation devolves into injustice and then swoop in at the last second and fix it all. It's going to be devastating. And just as it took the world didn't flood overnight, it's going to be transformative. And so I think that piece is a great way to enter into Advent.
Yeah. It's interesting when we were talking about this, when, you mentioned Noah, right? Or you didn't mention Noah.
Well,
Jesus mentioned Noah, right? He brought Noah. What's Noah but the end? God hangs his bow in the clouds, right, and gives up the violence. Yep. And the bow, the rainbow, but also the bow, like, which is the highest technological advance of weaponry at the time too, right? It's hanging the bow in the clouds is how that story ends. It's the hanging up, it's the end of the violence. And I love the idea that you mentioned that, yeah, the one that's taken away is not the one that's rescued. The one that's left behind is the one that's loving it. Yeah. And it's, so this is something I found today, and I feel like this is a rabbit hole, however you want to put it, that I don't know a lot about, so I don't want to go too far into it. But I know there are people that are really into the book of Enoch. And I'm not. And that's where I feel like I'd need to study this a little bit more. But I found this article called Disputing Enoch, reading Matthew 24:36-44 with Enochic Judaism. And I don't know, again, some of our listeners, if you know more about the book of Enoch and what it entails, it is an apocryphal book. And I know it's very apocalyptic. It's a lot of very legendary, kind of a lot of stories in it, but it connects to Noah in particular. And according to this guy, anybody that Jesus hears as soon as he starts talking about Noah, the time of Noah, would have been thinking about this kind of branch of Judaism. This school of thought of Judaism was very connected to understanding this time of Noah and the days before the flood. And the conclusion, so I'm just going to read the concluding paragraph instead of going through the whole thing. But he says, to an audience sympathetic to Enochic Judaism, Noah is a hero, a type of the one who will lead righteous remnant at the eschaton. Matthew addresses this audience, drawing parallels with Noah, idolatrous and violent eating and drinking, and the Watchers' marriage to human women. Now, that's a reference to the really weird part of Genesis 6 before the flood, right? The giants that come and marry women, right? It's the part, and Enoch has a lot to do with that early part of chapter 6 in Genesis that we often just kind of skip over. But that's the Watchers, the giants' marriage to human women and what that means. And the resulting decline of humanity requires God's radical judgment. While an Enochic audience agrees with this assessment, Matthew uses this story to urge them not to judge for themselves about the day, hour, and people's fate, but to leave judgment to God. It's like the wheat and the tare, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to come, somebody came and planted weeds in the middle of your field. God's going to, it's our job's to harvest all of it. Our job's not to separate it.
Yeah.
We're not the ones doing the judging. We just need to harvest and, keep doing the work. And again, this isn't about, our job is to keep doing the work, keep doing the justice, keep doing the mission, the ministry, keep eating and drinking, what is it? Keep grinding the mill, keep
Yeah.
rowing the boat, and because we're not the ones that get to decide who is in and who's out. Stop figuring out who's in and who's out, because that's up to God. That just do the work of justice and love your neighbor as yourself, and let God figure out who is and isn't doing that. And I think that's the heart of this passage, and the irony of so many that love this passage so much are very much into figuring out who's in and who's out. But that's the exact opposite of what this passage is supposed to be reminding us.
Yeah, I like that idea because it calls us into right. I mean, it calls us into action, which is really what we want, is this idea of calling us to action, not calling it like Jesus is calling people to withdraw. Jesus is, in the context of the gospel, we're on the cusp of the passion, and there's going to be this desire to just sit back and wait for things to happen. We're gospel jumping here, but I think of John, right? The Gospel of John in particular, in which what happens? Jesus is resurrected. Jesus comes back. Jesus bestows upon them the Holy Spirit and goes forward. And what do? They lock themselves in a room for another week. The Gospel of Luke, Jesus ascends and says, I am sending you forth from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth, and to carry my message to Samaria, Judea, and to the ends of the earth. And what do? They stand there and they look at the sky until angels have to come and tell them to knock it off. There's this inclination to just kind of sit back and wait. And I think that's also just part of our human nature, especially now, in this particular moment, in which there is so much injustice, so much outrage, so much contempt that's happening, that there is a temptation to just withdraw. There's a temptation to just stop. There's a temptation to not continue to keep alert, to keep being loving and caring and doing these things, and also keep living. Just there is a act of protest in refusing to allow injustice to control your life. And by that, I mean, there is a resistance simply in living, in honoring the Sabbath, in loving one another. That simple day to day and day out is in and of itself an act of resistance. And so I think you're absolutely right, Rob, is looking and seeing, how is this an encouraging moment, and how does that encouraging moment carry us deeper into Advent, which is actually much more about anticipating the second coming and participating in God's building of the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, as it is anticipating and remembering and celebrating the birth of Jesus.
Mhm. I mean, it's a call to action, but it's a call to very mundane kind of action, right? Grinding the mill,
Yeah.
right? Like just keep living your life. And it's not to say, everything doesn't have to be a major protest or grand entrance, or, every Sunday is not Palm Sunday. Everything's not the grand entrance, the triumphal entrance. Sometimes it's just grinding. And maybe I'm saying that today because I feel like today's been a grind, right? I mean, and but there is beauty in that, there is power in that, there's resistance in that, and just the ability to keep grinding. And I'm also very much informed by the Psalms recently, and the Psalms talk about waiting for the Lord, and it's not a waiting it's not sitting in the waiting room just flipping through a magazine kind of waiting. It's being ready kind of waiting. It's a wait for the Lord because it's coming.
Yeah.
It's an anticipation, it's an expectancy that is coming, but not to be anxious all the time, but to understand that what we're doing matters.
Mhm. Well, and it's along with that too, is remembering that this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
So yes, are protests important? Absolutely. Standing up for justice, doing all those things, absolutely. Those are 100% extremely important. We were talking about this last week, in particular. And if we burn ourselves out in the first mile of this race, in the first 5 miles of this race, we will never make it to the end. And so the other piece is, how do we build that resistance into our everydayness, which frankly is also what Jesus is talking about, which is, it's not just about the one-off moments here and there. It's about a transformed life. And that transformed life isn't necessarily going to be one that is in a constant state of active resistance, but also in states of passive resistance and aspects. In the same way that Jesus repeatedly needs to withdraw to recharge. Jesus feeds people, but he doesn't feed all the people. He reaches out. He allows other people to do that. And there's a gift too in realizing that at times stepping back allows others and gives the opportunity for others to step forward and make their own transformative pieces and actions.
Quick piece I wanted to throw out there too. Mark Davis, I was just looking at this note again. And this idea of someone will be taken away. They will be swept away. And that feels very much like the flood. But this also can be one will be taken and the other one left. It's also taken away as in taken away as a prisoner.
Mm.
And the other one is left for forgiveness, right? Which is kind of what we were just which is kind of what we were talking about, but also incredibly timely.
Yeah.
Some are taken away as a prisoner. Now there is an element of this as Jesus, pointing to coming persecutions, coming problems, living counterculturally as a Christian becomes more and more difficult. But I could argue that's exactly, what we're facing, right? Living lives of generosity, lives of compassion, of welcome and inclusion for the widow, the orphan, and the stranger or the immigrant among us, can be dangerous. And when we talk about, we don't know when they're coming and one will be taken away. You've told the story of seeing stuff happen even there in Crystal Lake, right? And it's just and I saw I know a lot of churches are dealing with this issue, and I saw a post on Facebook today about how do we communicate this with our churches, especially those that are purple churches, or that we don't want to get too political. And part of me was like, you tell the truth of what's happening.
Yeah.
And if people want to make that political, that's on them, but tell the truth of what's happening to people, that people are being taken away.
Yep.
And let them,
and they're not criminals.
and it's then let the chips fall where they may, right? Like, again, it's sort of like, it's not about judgment. It's not about judgment, just telling the truth about what's actually happening.
Yeah.
It's
almost like somebody said something about that, right? About the truth, and somehow it will let you free, but somewhere I'll try to quote that, see if we can find the quote, put it in the show.
Somewhere near the back.
Yeah, right. Friends, talking about show notes, there's a lot more that's in the show notes, so we encourage you all to check that out. Right now, we are going to turn to our next reading from Isaiah 2, 1-5.
Previously on the Bible.
I smell heaven's bakery cooking up something good for you, sister.
All right, Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1-5. This is what Isaiah, Amos' son, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house will be the highest of the mountains. It will be lifted above the hills. Peoples will stream to it. Many nations will go and say, "Come, let's go up to the Lord's mountain, to the house of Jacob's God, so that he may teach us his ways and we may walk in God's paths." Instruction will come from Zion, the Lord's word from Jerusalem. God will judge between the nations and settle disputes of the mighty nations. They will beat their swords into iron plows and their spears into pruning tools. Nation will not take up sword against nation. They will no longer learn how to make war. Come, house of Jacob, let's walk by the Lord's light.
So this is a great passage. I mean, it's one of those classic passages. And yet, every time I read it, I think, come on, next week is Peace Sunday. This is Hope Sunday. Okay, right?
It's another reminder that the election, that those words of Advent are kind of
Yeah, they're a little
made up.
hallmarky. With
They're
the
a little
exception of
hallmarky, a little
joy,
Cokesbury. Yeah.
yeah, with the exception of joy, there's not a deep, rich theological history in those. I mean, I want to be clear. I like them. It's, great opportunity to lift those things up. But Gaudete Sunday is the only one that has a deep, rich history. The others are, yeah.
If we revised the Revised Common Lectionary again, that's one thing I would do. It was just let them align with the hope, peace, joy, love. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, but here's the argument why it fits. You don't have peace without hope.
Well, right.
Right. And so I think that's the entry. And you don't have a hope. Hope is born out of vision. I don't remember. Rob, I probably shared this. But whether or not I shared it on the show, we were sitting down with one of our Illinois U.S. congressmen, Congress people, members of Congress. This one happened to be a man. And we were sitting down a meeting, and this individual was talking about all the things they were disappointed about stuff that's happening. And they were Democrat, and talked about all the things that they had tried to get done. Well, we would have fixed this if only this legislation that I had co-signed had done this, and we would have done this if only this, and we would have done this, and social media is the devil, and kids are on their phones too much, and blah blah blah, and boomers had it worse. It was a really exciting meeting, as you can imagine and hear. However, one of the best things that came out of that meeting was from my colleague Emily Davis, who, after hearing all of this, said, and threw our own denomination under the bus with good reason, in the United Church of Christ, and said, it is not enough to say what you're not anymore. You cannot just simply define ourselves or expect people to be inspired by you constantly saying, I'm not that. You have to give people a vision of what you are for, what you are building, what you are moving to. And that is so, and that happened a couple months ago, and it has stuck with me. Reverend Davis just said it so, it was so beautifully, and it wasn't said snarkily or rudely. It was just said in a invitation of, what vision are we going to build for what the future is? This is that vision, right? This is that vision of hope that says, this is what we're looking toward. When we ask ourselves, what does this second coming when the human one look like? This is what it looks like. And that's going to be good for some, and it's going to be very challenging. I will say this, it's going to be good for all. But for those of us in positions of power and privilege, it's going to be extraordinarily challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and Isaiah is a 66 chapter book. We're right at the beginning, right? It's telling us where things are going right at the right from the start. And the other thing that I've always found fascinating about this beautiful piece is that Isaiah isn't called, right? The famous Isaiah's call story of, and the coal touches his lips, and then he's ready. This is already happening. Yeah. Right. Isaiah's laying this out before he's even had that like spiritual, powerful experience. There's something happening here. It's the beginning. This is the advent of Isaiah. I mean, this is the beginning of what the vision's going to be. Now there's going to be problems. And if you know Isaiah, that is such a typical, Advent reading, there are certainly problems along the way. There is frustration. There are missteps, but he's laying out exactly where we're going from the start. And the instruction from the Lord, this reminds me of Psalm 1 again, right? It reminds me of the journey of the way, right? This is something that we're doing, that we're going to. We're not there yet, but we know where we're going. I know the place where I'm taking you, right? And some might say, well, we don't know the place where we're going. Well, follow me and we'll get there. And it's such a beautiful piece then of what to expect. But if you don't know where you're going to go, then you have no hope of finding your way, right? Like this is the destination. And that's why it is such a beautiful piece for the first Sunday of Advent, because if we're going to start on this journey, we need to know where we're going first, if we have any hope of succeeding.
And it's New Year's, right? It's not just Advent.
Right.
It's the beginning of the church year, right? I think it's an opportunity for us to really to lift that piece. And it connects back to what you were saying too, Rob, which is it's also this invitation that we have as well. And so just like the last one you were saying, there's an aspect of this that encourages you to participate in something, but what you are not invited to do is invite to judge. In the same way you were talking with that Book of Enoch piece about the fact that the judgment is the work of God. This says that. Verse 4, God will judge between the nations and settle the dispute between the mighty nations. That's what God is going to do. Your job, right, is going to be to follow in the way of God that God has said. And for Christians, for us, it's to follow in that way of Jesus Christ, to go up. What does it mean to do this, to look to God, to direct this whole point of it's a little bit hard in Isaiah 2, right? Because when they're talking about the mountain of the Lord's house, they're talking about Zion, right? They're talking about Zion. They're specifically talking about the temple. This is pre-exilic. The temple still exists. Let us go up to the Lord's mountain, to the house of Jacob's God, that he may teach us his way and we may walk in God's path. Well, the reality is that is not the case anymore, right? There is, the temple doesn't exist. Jerusalem is still there, but good Lord, like, it's as the Lord's mountain, it's a dubious claim in these times. And there's this piece of, as Judaism has changed, so Christianity has evolved out of this, to this idea of, we don't look to the tabernacle and the Holy of Holies, we look to Christ. And now we look to Christ, we look to the body of Christ. And so that end of verse 3, or that middle part, probably verse 3b, so that God may teach us God's ways and that we may walk in God's paths. This is what directs us. This is where is our vision set? Our vision is set on God. Our vision is not set on a particular political party. Our vision is not set on maybe even growing the church or whatever that is. Our vision is set on God and being the most faithful that we can be. And that may lead us to church growth. That may lead us to a lot of things. It may lead us to the cross. But that's where our vision is focused on, is on God, and where that's going to be. The last thing I'll say too is it's worth reading. If this is going to be your primary text for Advent, you're going to go all Isaiah and you're really going to focus on this text for this first Sunday, read chapter 1. Even though chapters 2 through 4 in Isaiah, there's debate, you can see it in the show note, about whether or not this was added in later in pieces. But either way, canonically, it was chosen to present it in this way. And it's fascinating to see that Isaiah 1 is a brutal condemnation of the hypocrisy of Israel. Those that are doing everything legalistically, religiosity correctly, and just missing the mark in caring and loving one another with all their hearts, souls, mind, and strength. And especially caring for the least of these. And then the second half of 1 is all the things that God is going to do to fix Israel, to redeem Israel, to bring them back. And it's that redemption of all that God is going to do and invite us to do that leads to this vision. So it's worth going back a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite verses, and when we started to talk about it too, is this idea of, so it's God's judgment, but we will walk in his paths.
Mm-hmm.
And again, maybe I've got Psalms on my mind, but when he talks about we will walk in his paths, for out of Zion shall go forth the instruction, that's the Torah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And the word, the Torah and the word. I mean, that is, if that's not a beautiful moment of Advent, right? What's the Torah? Especially if you remember that the Torah is the stories of God, right? It's not just the laws of God. It's the stories of saving a family, of Joseph, forgiving his brothers, of Moses, of leading the people out of Egypt into the promised land, or right to the cusp of the promised land, the giving of the law, the relationship that is made. When we think of the Torah and just limit it to the instruction or to the laws or to the list of, even to the 10 commandments, you're missing so much. But this idea of going forth with the stories of God and God's people and the word of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we do, right? That's why we gather Sunday, to tell the stories of God, to share the word of the Lord. Um, and I think this is, when we think about what Christmas is all about, what incarnation is, it's celebrating that the Torah and the law and the word were made flesh,
That's
and
it. The word was made.
we're a part of this, right? This is now you're kind of mixing languages, logos and the Hebrew word here. These are different concepts, but they're definitely related,
I
right?
think they're
And
deeply related because Torah is
yeah,
just beyond the first 5 books, right? It is the instruction. It is the way of God. It is
yeah.
how people learn how to be God's people, which I think yes, they're different, but I think you're right on track, Rob.
And I just think that's such a beautiful reminder of and if we follow the law, if we follow the Torah, follow the word, what does that lead to? But then the beautiful, spears into pruning, swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. And of course, there's the beautiful statue at the UN, which, it's a great visual that you can use a lot of times. And you can debate, how effective that is. But the concept is that we're going to bring nations together and through words, through communication, going to avoid the destruction, the violence. And you can argue how effective it is, but the idea of that is right here.
Well, and it's also helpful to know that in the midst of we are so far from the kingdom of God, and yet we are so far better than we were than at the time of Isaiah.
Right.
Right. I mean, as not to say there's a temptation of like progress and look, we're just going like, yeah, I hear that, but there are important things to look at and say that we are continuing to live in the least violent time in the history of our nation. Do we have the capacity to destroy the world multiple times over? Yes. Or do we have the destructive capacity to destroy the earth with climate change? 100%. I'm not ignoring those things, but also we are living in terms of just massive amounts of rampant violence in one of the least violent times when people have the most access to education, literature, healthcare, things. Now, we are long pace. There is an immense road that needs to go and a huge curve of that moral arc toward that needs to happen before we get to justice. But I think sometimes it is helpful to put it into perspective as a means not of saying, look, we've made it, but instead of a means of look how far we've come. And if we focus on God, how much farther we have to go, but we can do it because we've come. So the world is not actually going to hell in a handbasket. Again, despair can lead us into the same withdrawal as Pollyannic optimism. So I just want us to be real careful with that piece.
Well, it reminds me, going back to our conversation a couple of weeks ago with apocalyptic literature and science fiction,
Yeah.
right? There's dystopian science fiction that is very apocalyptic. And these are the things, if we don't heed some warnings, some bad stuff is going to go down, right? I mean, but there's also the Star Trek in science fiction that shows you the sort of, we're actually kind of close. It's feasible, right? Like, let's imagine if we harnessed this stuff for good, what could be done instead. So maybe Isaiah is the Star Trek to the apocalypse is the Hunger Games, right? It's the other way
Yeah.
of looking at it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No. I mean, I like the Hunger Games, but man, it's that I know a lot of people hate it just how it ends, but yeah, no, I like that you brought that back. All right. Well, check out, as we've referenced a couple times, check out the show notes. We got a lot of great stuff that's hiding in there. But now we've got a wafer for you.
Now that's a tasty wafer.
That's right. Our wafer today is going to be Romans. I gotta tell you, Rob, every time Romans is like that thing that just it's like the monster in the horror show that no matter how often you think it's gone, it just creeps coming back. It's like, oh wait, now what? We're doing something? It's Romans.
That thing that's stuck on your shoe that you can't quite wipe off.
That's it. Anyway, but Romans is what we have, and there are parts that are, well, It's Romans 13, 8 through 14, Common English. Don't be in debt to anyone except for the obligation to love each other. Whoever loves another person has fulfilled the law. The commandments: don't commit adultery, don't murder, don't steal, don't desire what others have, and all the other commandments are summed up in one word. You must love your neighbor as yourself. Love doesn't do anything wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is what fulfills the law. As you do all this, you know what time it is. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your sleep. Now, our salvation is nearer than when we first had faith. The night is almost over and the day is near. So let's get rid of the actions that belong to darkness and put on the weapons of light. Let's behave appropriately as people who live in the day, not partying and getting drunk, not in sleeping around and obscene behavior, not in fighting and obsession. Instead, dress yourself with the Lord Jesus Christ and don't plan to indulge your selfish desires. Okay, not the worst Romans.
Yeah, no. This is, I mean, 8 through 10, that's great stuff, right? This is, I mean, it's so good. In fact, 8 through 10 is one of those passages that it's hard to preach on because it's like, mic drop. Like, that's it. Like, it's all there. Like,
if you've got a busy service, though, you got baptisms, maybe you're doing communion, you got a whole bunch. This is you could preach a Jesus sermon, read it and be like, instead of you saying the word is fulfilled, just be, all right, go do it. Done. Amen.
Right. Yeah. You must, and there's also, I mean, this is somewhat translation issues too, but this idea of, it's all summed up in one word, and then he gives you 6 words. But it's one concept. You must love your neighbor as yourself. Love doesn't do anything wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is what fulfills the law. I mean, it's hard to add anything.
You were talking earlier, Rob, people are saying, how do we do this with purple churches and things like that? And I have a purple church and you think you kind of have a purple church and things like that. And this is it. You want to talk about it? This is it. Right. How do we talk about what's happening in the world right here? Love doesn't do anything wrong to a neighbor. Love doesn't stand by while a neighbor is taken off to some unknown detention center. Love doesn't stand by when neighbors are terrified to go to the grocery store. Love doesn't stand by this afternoon. We got a call through our rapid response team that we had a carload of folks who were landscapers who were texting because they were terrified because they were hemmed in by 2 SUVs. There were 2 SUVs and they were worried to get out of their car because they thought it was ICE. Didn't end up being, but the fear and the terror is rude. That's doing something wrong to your neighbor. And it's also doing something wrong to your neighbor to write them off and, determine that you don't have to love them because you've determined that that what they're doing is not lovable. So I feel like this is your opportunity to build off the last 2 passages with this and say, love is what fills the law. So let's talk about how we don't do anything wrong to our neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the second half connects very well, especially to the first text, right? This is what it's today. Wake up. I mean, and again, you hate to use cliches that have so much deep meaning now, but this is stay awake. This is, you've got being awake is not a bad thing. It's exactly what Paul is telling us to do. Be aware of what's going on. Be aware of the negativity. Be aware of the problems. And it's, there's some legalism here in verse 13, about partying and getting drunk or sleeping around, obscene behavior. Yeah, those things aren't great to do, but like it's more than that too, right? God is more interested in the justice and and doing harm. And I think I think it's somewhat of a metaphor. I don't think we need to be prepared. When you know something's coming the next morning, you don't go out and get drunk because you're going to have a hangover, right? It's not, I don't think, again, I don't think this is saying don't ever drink, don't ever, have fun. It's a metaphor for life saying, be ready for what's happening, be aware of what's going on, because if you don't, you're missing some big stuff here.
Or maybe don't throw a giant lavish Great Gatsby party when people
Well.
are not going to have food to put on their tables the next day, which
Yeah.
you are directly responsible for.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry to get too political, but it's hard not to, right?
No,
I mean,
I
this
know.
isn't,
I know.
but I think it gets to this fact of it's selfish desires. Having a good time with friends, getting together, celebrating. This is the season, what's happening. I mean, this is kind of a downer, right? You know, we're entering the holiday season. No parties and no drinking, right? I mean, and, you know, no obscene behavior, like, you know, and all these things. It comes to this. Dress yourself with Lord Jesus Christ. You can do that in all of these things. Well, some people can and some people can't, right? I mean, some people struggling with addiction can't do that. But I mean, if you're able to, then that's fine. Do what you do in the clothed with Christ is still from Colossians from a couple of weeks ago, right? I mean, as it says here, dress yourself with Christ. That do it in that way that is respectful, that you can go to a party, you can have a drink, you can do these things in ways that are, you can have sexual relations in a way which is honoring and loving and respectful, that is not a selfish desire. You can even, you know, I mean, protest is a way of fighting, but there's a way to do that in a way which is, you know, a way which is nonviolent and a part of representing Christ appropriately. But I think it's different from, like, you know, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship telling me I was going to burn in hell because I went to a kegger that had beer and not just root beer. Like, you know, I'm not sure that was, I think that there are times when it can be taken too far.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do like this idea, and it's probably because I love fantasy almost as much as I love science fiction, maybe even more. But I love this image, which is, you know, there's this great imagery. Let's get rid of the actions that belong to darkness, Rob, and put on the weapons of light, right? I mean, it's lightsabers, right? This is it. But your it's like the, it reminds me of Revelation, right? And he will strike them down with the sword, and the sword is the word of God, right? The weapons that we're talking about, the weapons of light, are love, forgiveness, grace, and respect. That's what we're talking about here. And so I think that's the important piece, because it's too easy, again, to twist this back into a violent premillennial rapture-esque dispensationalism or self-righteous violence. That's not what he's saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the weapons of light are the love that he was just talking about. I mean, these paragraphs need to be held together. They're not two separate thoughts. They're connected very much.
No.
This is, as you're loving one another, you know, you need to do these things. Like,
as you're loving one another, cut them down with a lightsaber, Rob.
right.
All right, friends, there's more on this wafer. Go to pulpitfiction.com, where you can find all of that and so much more as well. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for the Pulpit Fiction Podcast. We apologize for those who are trying to join us online and we got a little bit late. A reminder, next week we're going to be recording live on Tuesday at 1:30 Central Time here in the United States. Again, that's a Tuesday, next Tuesday before Thanksgiving if you're here in the States. If you need more Pulpit Fiction between now and then, head over to pulpitfiction.com, where you can find a lot more of our exegetical notes, and you can find links to our sources and all sorts of other fun stuff there at Pulpit Fiction, as well as interviews we've done with folks and things like that. You can always find us on Instagram and Facebook at Pulpit Fiction. You can find us on X at Pulpit F Podcast. You can find us just about anywhere that you listen to podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify. If you're able to leave us a review at any of those places, please do. That really helps other people find the show. You can always email us if you have thoughts, suggestions, corrections, all those things, show@pulpitfiction.us. Support us by going to pulpitfiction.com/support. I want to thank so many of our just amazing donors that are able to keep this podcast going. So thank you.
Yeah, and a lot of them that stuck with us even through the hiatus. They were still, a lot of recurring donors did not cancel. And if you did cancel, and we're back.
Hop on back.
You can hop on back in if you want. But if you want to watch us on YouTube now, that's the thing, youtube.com/@pulpitfiction. And it is the little @ symbol as a part of that. And then you click on the live button. You can see all of our old live streams, and we're building subscribers. Click on that subscribe button, really helps us out as well. And of course, the podcast still gets released on all your podcast players. We want to thank Scott Fletcher for the voice bumpers, Nikolai Heidlis for the transition music, and Brian O'Dean for our closing song. Please have a blessed week.
Hate to say it's time to go, but it happens every time, so now you're free to go about your day. We've heard the word in voice and song, we've wondered and we've laughed along, so go and preach the good news on your way. This is the Pulpit Fiction Podcast for preachers and seekers and Bible geeks. This is the Pulpit Fiction Podcast. We'll see you back next week.